You're a crow. You're just sitting there on a telephone wire, doing crow things, stealing French fries from a parking lot, judging every human who walks underneath you, maybe plotting something. Honestly, who knows what crows are plotting? And then a person stops below you. They look up, they make eye contact, and something in that walnut-sized brain of yours starts running. Not a reflex, not a flinch, something more like an assessment. You've seen this person before. You remember the shape of their face from 3 weeks ago, from across a different parking lot, in different light. You remember what they did. And right now, in this moment, you are deciding what kind of creature they are. Here's the thing nobody told you about wild animals. They're paying attention. Not in the vague, instinctive way we've always assumed, the way a smoke detector pays attention to a room. In a specific, deliberate, you personally way. The crow on the wire isn't just registering your presence. It's filing you. For a long time, the dominant scientific view was that this kind of thinking was our thing, human thing. The inner life, the memory, the social evaluation, the something that looks like judgment, was what separated us from everything else. Animals were sophisticated machinery, beautiful, complex, but ultimately reactive. You poke them, they respond. You leave, they forget. And then the research started arriving, quietly at first, then all at once, like a dam giving way in slow motion. It turns out animals are doing a lot more than we thought, like a lot more. The real question, the one that keeps researchers up at night and should probably keep you up too, isn't whether wild animals have rich inner lives. At this point, the evidence for that is genuinely hard to argue with. The question is something stranger and more specific. Do wild animals know when a human is trying to help them? Not just tolerate a human, not just fail to flee. Actually register the intent behind the behavior. Recognize help as help. Which sounds like an absurd philosophical paradox, and yet it is a Tuesday in the life of a wildlife rehabilitator.
The answer, it turns out, involves a crow that remembers your face for years, a 50-foot whale that held still while strangers cut rope from its body and then circled back to look them in the eye, and a Capuchin monkey that will refuse food from someone it watched be unkind to a stranger the monkey has no stake in, no relationship with, no reason to care about. None of that is nothing, and it starts with understanding why we ever thought otherwise. Morgan's canon. That's the name. Lloyd Morgan, 1894, British psychologist, trying to do something genuinely reasonable, stop scientists from projecting human emotions onto animals that were probably just running on instinct. The rule was simple. If you can explain an animal's behavior with a simpler mental process, you must. Don't say the dog loves you when you can just say the dog has been conditioned to associate you with food. Reasonable. Responsible even. Good science in principle. Here's what happened in practice. The rule got weaponized. Not maliciously, just the way rules do when they become the thing you're graded on, the thing that separates serious researchers from the credulous ones.
For most of the 20th century, suggesting that an animal might have something like an inner experience, memory, preference, something that functions like grief, was career adjacent to suggesting the moon was made of cheese. You didn't do it. You described behavior in the most mechanistic language possible, and you moved on. A dog wasn't mourning, it was exhibiting separation-adjacent distress responses, which honestly is a sentence that should embarrass everyone involved. The overcorrection ran so deep that when Jane Goodall started publishing her observations of chimpanzees in the 1960s, giving them names, describing what looked unmistakably like personalities, like relationships, like political maneuvering, the scientific establishment did not celebrate. They pushed back hard. She hadn't been formally trained, they said. She was anthropomorphizing. She was doing the thing you weren't supposed to do. She was also right. By the time researchers started quietly, carefully, peer-reviewably admitting that Morgan's canon had swung too far, that the rule designed to prevent bad science had itself become bad science, the evidence was already stacking up in ways that were difficult to explain away. Elephants returning to the bones of their dead, ravens appearing to play, rats refusing to press a lever for food if pressing it delivered a shock to another rat in an adjacent cage. That last one is worth sitting with for a second. A rat, in a laboratory, declining food rather than cause pain to a stranger. Not a packmate, not a relative, a stranger. The mechanism that makes that possible, the capacity to model another creature's experience and factor it into your own behavior, is the same mechanism that might allow a wild animal to register something as specific and abstract as human intent. Not just this creature is near me, but this creature is trying to do something for me. Morgan's canon told us not to go there. The animals, apparently, didn't get the memo. Off the coast of California, near Monterey Bay, in 2011, a humpback whale swam up to a group of divers and did not leave. That sentence doesn't fully land until you sit with the scale of it. A humpback whale is roughly 50 feet long and weighs somewhere around 40 tons. 40 tons, which is the weight of about 8 full-grown African elephants. All of it moving through water with a grace that has absolutely no business existing at that size. This animal could have ended every diver present with a single involuntary movement, a tail flick, a roll, just existing too close. Instead, it held still. The divers noticed the whale was entangled, fishing line wrapped around its body, cutting into the flesh, a crab trap dangling from one of its pectoral fins. One diver, James Mosquito, went under and started cutting, and the whale, which had every reason to panic, which was dealing with something that had probably been causing it pain for days, stayed calm, stayed present, repositioned slightly when it needed to, not to flee, not to thrash, but to give Mosquito better access to the next section of line. It took over an hour. 4 divers, multiple knives, working around an animal the size of a city bus that was choosing, in some functional sense of that word, to cooperate. And then, when the last line was cut, the whale did something that none of the divers expected and that nobody has a clean scientific explanation for. It swam to each diver one by one and nudged them gently. Mosquito described it later as being nuzzled. He said he could feel it in his bones, this enormous animal moving with sudden softness, making contact. Now, was that gratitude? We don't know. We genuinely don't know, and the honest answer is that we may never have the tools to know for certain what was happening in that animal's experience. What we can say is that the behavior was not random, not reflexive, and not explained by anything in the whale's immediate self-interest. It had already been freed. There was nothing left to gain. What it looked like, and I'm just going to say what it looked like, was acknowledgment. One creature recognizing that another creature had done something for it and responding in kind. A 50-foot animal. An hour of stillness. And then, at the end, something that looked startlingly like a thank you. The diver surfaced. The whale dove. The Pacific closed over it like nothing had happened. Whales are one thing. But here's where it gets genuinely strange, because the same basic pattern shows up in an animal with a brain the size of a tangerine, running what amounts to a full social intelligence operation from underneath the water. Bottlenose dolphins have been documented in multiple cases approaching divers in distress, not fleeing, not investigating from a safe distance, but actively intervening. In 2009, in the Red Sea, a diver named Yvonne the Gentle was struggling with a serious equipment malfunction that was pulling her into a dangerous descent. A bottlenose dolphin appeared, circled her twice, and then pressed its body against hers in a way that slowed her descent and gave her time to stabilize. The dolphin didn't brush past her. It didn't surface for air and return to whatever dolphin business it had been conducting. It stayed. What makes this case interesting to researchers isn't the helping itself, it's the positioning. The dolphin didn't just swim near her. It oriented its body specifically to counteract the direction she was being pulled, which means it had to model her situation, understand that she was going somewhere she didn't want to go, and calculate how its own mass and movement could change that. That is not a reflex. That is not self-preservation. That is something researchers call pro-social behavior, helping that extends beyond the helper's own immediate interest, directed at another individual's specific need. A rapid intuitive cost-benefit analysis in a brain the size of a tangerine that somehow outperformed most emergency response protocols. And here's the part that really matters. Dolphins in documented cases don't do this for every diver they encounter. They do it for divers who are visibly struggling. The distinction requires reading behavioral signals, movement, posture, direction, urgency, and mapping them onto a category that means something like, this one needs help. That's not stimulus response. That's interpretation. If this is the kind of thing that gets you, drop a like, leave a comment. It genuinely helps. Anyway. The research on dolphin cognition keeps arriving at the same uncomfortable conclusion. These animals are tracking the internal states of other creatures around them, including creatures they have no evolutionary reason to care about. They're not helping humans because humans are in their pod. They're helping because something in the situation reads as requiring help. full stop. Which means the question isn't really whether dolphins can recognize a human in distress. They demonstrably can. The question is what they do with that recognition, and whether what they do next looks anything like a choice. It does. That's the part that keeps the researchers talking. Now put yourself in a different body. You're a Capuchin monkey in a Yale research lab, and a human just walked in and tried to hand you a piece of food. Simple enough. Except you watched that same human 2 minutes ago refuse to hand a piece of food to another person who asked for it. A stranger. Someone you've never met and will never see again. Do you take the food? Capuchins don't. Consistently, repeatedly, across multiple controlled studies, Capuchin monkeys refuse food from humans they've watched behave unkindly toward a third party, someone the monkey has no relationship with, no stake in, no reason to care about. The monkey saw something, filed it, and now it's sitting there with its arms crossed, making a moral judgment about your character based on witnessed behavior towards someone else entirely. A monkey is watching you interact with a stranger, deciding what kind of person you are, and filing that information away for future reference. That sentence sounds like something from a nature documentary trying too hard. It is also just what the research shows. This is the capacity that makes recognizing human helping behavior possible in the first place. You can't register that someone is trying to help you unless you can model intent, unless you can read behavior and extract meaning from it that goes beyond the immediate physical event. The Capuchin isn't just tracking what you did, it's tracking what you meant, or something functionally identical to what you meant, which at a certain point is the same thing. But here's where the warmth of all this runs into something colder. Some animals get very good at reading human helpers. Too good. Wildlife rehabilitators, the people who spend months nursing injured animals back to health, who are, by any measure, the humans most actively trying to help wild animals, have known for decades that the relationship has a cost. An animal that learns to associate humans with safety, with food, with the absence of threat, carries that association back into the wild. And in the wild, a fox that walks up to strangers, a hawk that lands on an outstretched arm, a deer that doesn't run, that's not a success story. That's a death sentence written in trust. The rehabilitators who understand this wear masks, they use puppets, they go to elaborate lengths to help without being recognizable as human, because the help only works if the animal doesn't learn the wrong lesson from receiving it. Think about that for a second. The most effective wildlife helpers are the ones who make sure the animal never knows they were there. The kindness has to be invisible to count. Let's zoom all the way out now and ask the evolutionary question, because it's the one that should bother you most. Humans spent the overwhelming majority of their shared history with wild animals as predators, not friendly observers with cameras, not rehabilitators with masks and good intentions. Predators. For tens of thousands of years, if you were a crow or a dolphin or a humpback whale and a human was nearby, the statistically reasonable response was to leave. Fast. The signal human approaching mapped onto danger with a reliability that should have been burned into every wild animal's nervous system by now, selected for over countless generations, essentially permanent. So why does the signal still get overridden? Why does a whale hold still? Why does a crow remember a kind face and not just a threatening one? The answer, according to researchers like Franz de Waal, who spent decades studying prosocial behavior across species, is that the underlying cognitive machinery was never really about humans at all. It was built for reading group members, for tracking who in your social world is safe, who is threatening, who helped you last winter, who stole your food. The capacity to distinguish between a creature that means you harm and a creature that's trying to help you is ancient, and it evolved entirely within species. Whale reading whale, crow reading crow, capuchin reading capuchin. What happens when a human shows up moving slowly, making no sudden gestures, keeping their body low and non-threatening, offering something instead of taking it? The animal's social intelligence runs the same program it always runs. It reads the signals. And the signals, it turns out, are not species-specific. Slow approach. No aggression. Orientation toward rather than away. These read the same in almost every social species that has ever had to figure out who to trust. The crow doesn't know you're a human in any category it was built to recognize. It knows you're a creature that is behaving in a particular way, and it has very sophisticated opinions about creatures that behave in particular ways. This is the part I find genuinely hard to get my head around. The bridge between species isn't some special human-animal bond, some mystical connection. It's just that the grammar of safe behavior is universal enough that it crosses the gap. The whale held still not because it understood human, but because something in the approach read as not a threat, possibly a solution. Evolution didn't design any of this for us. We just happen to fit the profile. The crow remembers your face. The dolphin reads your posture. The whale makes room for your hands. None of them learned to do this for humans specifically. They just already knew how to read the room. So, back to the telephone wire. You're a crow. You're sitting there doing crow things, stealing French fries, running a facial recognition operation on every human who passes underneath you, filing people into mental folders with a thoroughness that would embarrass most HR departments. And a person stops below you, looks up, makes eye contact. Here's what you now know that you didn't know at the start of this. That crow is not just reacting to your presence, it's reading you. It's pulling behavioral signals, your posture, your pace, your orientation, and running them through social intelligence software that predates every civilization you learned about in school. Software built over millions of years to answer one specific question: is this creature safe? And the genuinely strange part is that you have an answer to give it. Not because you've studied animal cognition, not because you know the research on pro-social behavior or Morgan's canon or the humpback off Monterey Bay, but because the grammar of safe behavior is something you already speak, fluently, whether you know it or not. Slow down, don't loom, don't take, offer something, or just be still. The crow reads all of it. It has been reading creatures like you, creatures that move, that have intentions, that can be trusted or not trusted, for longer than our species has existed. The University of Washington researchers who ran the crow mask experiments found that crows who'd been trapped and banded, handled, stressed, legitimately inconvenienced, remembered the specific human face responsible for up to 5 years afterward. They scolded that face. They recruited other crows to scold that face. They gossiped. Crows literally gossiped about the humans who had wronged them, passing the information through the flock like a neighborhood watch group with excellent memory and a grudge. The same machinery runs in reverse. A crow that's been fed, that's been left alone, that's watched you be gentle with something small and helpless, that crow files you differently. Not as a concept, as a specific individual, with a history, with a record. You are in the crow's records right now.